Welcome to What Writers Should Know, sponsored by Horsemen Publications. I'm Erica. I'm an author, but I'm also the CEO and founder of Horsemen Publications. And with me today is the amazing and fantastic J.M. Paquette. Hello.
Hello. I am also an author and the lead editor at Four Horsemen.
Yes. So what the crap sticks are we talking about today?
We are talking about world building issues and how to keep your magic system consistent throughout a series.
Oh yeah. So I know we're gonna do this amazing, wonderful, super fantastic book, dun 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 dun, General World Building Guide. So the links in the show notes. But let's talk about people messing up their magic. What do you mean messing up the magic?
Like in book one, your character, in order to cast a magic spell, has to, like D&D traditional rules, you have to memorize your spells in the morning. And then once you use it, it's gone and you have to re-memorize it again. But by book three, your character's just slinging magic without having to memorize. It's little things like that will knock a reader out of the book. So you want to make sure that how your magic system works from the beginning is the way it works all the way through, unless your character has some sort of transformation. I know a lot of books where they're like, now she's a god, so then it doesn't matter. But if that's not the kind of story you're writing, make sure that from the start, everything stays and works the same way.
Yes, and I think that's something, even if it's not like a high fantasy book, a lot of people might be going, I don't high fantasy. But I think it's true with even paranormal books and stuff like that. That is like a degree of magic. And like, how do people become werewolves? Like, is there a whole process? Do they have to be a special kind of person? That sort of thing. Like little things like that you don't even think about. And then you're like, oh yeah, and Bob's a vampire and Sally's a vampire and blah, 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 blah. And then,
I know you're talking. All right. So I love Vampire Diaries, like in my soul. I read the books before it was a show. But the way that series dealt with the cure to vampirism, I don't know if you remember this when it was on, but the rules for the cure changed like every 3 or 4 episodes. There were like different guidelines for how it worked and who could use it. And I was like, if you're going to have this like all powerful magical item, it should work the same way, or give me a reason why it works differently with this vampire versus that vampire, because otherwise I was like, didn't you just say he should be dead? That's how you killed the bad guy this way. How come you can't kill your hero's fine though? Okay.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize how bad that will throw a reader out of the story. And readers also remember things we don't remember, authors. Like, I feel like a lot of readers are better at knowing our books than we are sometimes, because they'll say stuff and then you'll be like, what are you, huh? Yeah. And you're like, oh yeah, no, that's one of my favorites too. And you literally pull up your Word doc to look through it to see where you mentioned somebody named Frank that can cast spells. Like, you're like, what is happening here? So what do you recommend for people when they're doing that? Because sometimes you're writing, it's just flowing, you're like, and this person has glittery skin,
So I would say don't interrupt your writing flow. Like, just keep putting the story out there. Magic systems are something you check at the end, right? Like right before you start editing, when you're probably doing your beta readers, right? You're checking for story development and consistency and character issues, that kind of stuff. That's kind of when you go through and you're like, all right, in my first book, also keep track, keep notes, have a world building guide, have a document, make a Pinterest page, whatever method works for you. Keep track of what the rules are for your system. I know as you're writing, you're like, I'm going to remember this. You're not. By the time you get to book 4, you're going to have to do what I did before I wrote a world building guide for myself, which is, I'm starting book 5. Let me go back and reread book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. And by the time I'm at book 5, I'm like, this is not time. This is a bad use of my time. Not that I don't enjoy rereading my stories, but rereading them every single time to get all of the mechanics back fresh in my brain, I could have just taken notes and then saved myself the effort.
True. And I think another thing, there's a dangerous trap in rereading your work, because every time we write, we get better. every time you write in general. I mean, there are rare exceptions, but in general, every time you write something, you get slightly better at it, hopefully.
Mhm.
And so when you go back and read something that you wrote 3-4 years ago, right? 10 years ago, I read something I wrote 15 years ago.
Like,
Oh, back before some children were even born. And I read it and I'm like, oh, I could do this better. Yeah.
Mhm.
And what happens, I think, as creatives is some of us get stuck on that, like we want that whatever level of perfection in our books. So we get stuck on, oh, I need to rewrite this. This is, And so then you're not in your present story because guess what? You could fix your books till the end of time. You could rewrite the whole thing. When you get to the end of it, you're a better writer than you were when you started. You could rewrite the whole thing again. It is vicious cycle that you can get into.
Definitely.
So World Building Guide, keep track of your magic. What kind of little things also are you talking about? Because it's not just spell casting, right? It's magical abilities that people have, like, and how does it execute and who does it affect?
Yeah, and if you have some sort of world, like one of the things I do in my urban fantasy series, Invite Me In, is the way I do fated mates. So when a vampire meets their fated mate, they get a reflection, and that's one of the things that they know. And it's like a, that's not even real; it's a myth. And then one of them gets a reflection, and it's like, who the fuck did I just meet? Out of the people that I've met. So then I have to make sure that that's how it works. So if I ever mention someone having a reflection, or even stupid stuff like, they're a couple, so maybe they're in a restaurant and the restaurant has mirrors, and I mention, something in passing that I would do in another book where I'm like, she looked over and looked at the two of them and was like, oh, we make a cute couple. Yeah, that means he's your fated mate, and now you have to stick with that. And if he's just a date that she's contemplating while the real vampire is like off in the wings, you just screwed up big time. So it's in the little things that you would normally write about. You're like, oh no, I made that a world mechanic. So keeping track of that is an important thing. And that's something that you won't really think about, but your readers are going to come back and they're going to be like, I thought that in book 2, Roger was actually her mate because he had a reflection when they were out at that restaurant that one time. And I was like, oh, he was a throwaway character. And they just went on one date so that she could go back to, Theo or whoever it was. So those
you said a good word there, which was mechanic. I think people don't use that word enough because all these things we establish in our stories are mechanics. They're how that world, even if it's present day, because like I know the stories you're talking about are set in present existing day. Like they could be in Chicago, you don't know, but it's not current Chicago, it's your Chicago, because there are mechanics that don't work the same as reality presently works, right? There are things that are different. And if you're not very good at keeping track of them, no matter how creative you get, or even if you want to change it, the problem is you've already set that rule. You've already created that reality, and you're about to break reality in your story.
And the readers who are going to be upset are the same people who will read a book that's set in Manhattan and you make a throwaway line. You're like, yeah, I lived on 56th. That was in Hell's Kitchen. And someone will be like, Hell's Kitchen stops at 51st. Like that's the person who's going to read it. And it will, if you know the area and for example, your characters, they I don't know, it's in New York, and then they go to a Publix for a grocery store. You're like, wait a minute, there aren't any Publixes. That's a Florida store, a southeastern US store. So the people who will notice like geographical inconsistencies are the same readers who are going to pick up on your your magic system inconsistencies, and they'll be upset about it.
No, they will. And that's how you can end up with bad reviews. You never want to push a reader out of a story. Yeah. And you really don't want to do it because of clumsiness or have to rely on other people. I know a lot. I've talked about this, I think, in one of these What Writers Should Know on research, right? When I was talking to Valerie, and we were talking about the fact that a lot of times people rely on their beta readers to be the experts on their book series. And I think there's a danger in that. I think it's helpful, but there's a danger if you don't make all of that at your fingertips as well to understand that. understand all, like, what is the history? Are there spells that affect people differently? And some magic systems are super complex, but you were talking about like Vampire Diaries in general. Their magic has to do with the vampires and the werewolves that exist in those worlds for the most part, but it's true in the book and in the show, things were just breaking. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. And it's hard when you're the reader going, wait a minute, why do I know this more than the author knows this? This is their book. This is their world.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And, like some authors, if you're Brandon Sanderson, you have a team of people working on your book, and some of that team, their only job is to double check your magic system. And if you're in that position, that's amazing. Well done, But if you're just, kind of the lone writer and you have your beta readers, maybe if you know one, like if you're writing fantasy and you have a beta reader who's like super into fantasy, maybe ask them specifically, like, hey, when you read this, can you just double check my magic for me again, just to catch something. And like you said, there is a danger with relying completely on a beta reader. I wouldn't do that. But between you having your notes, double checking against that, and then having one more pair of eyes, you're usually pretty good. You're not going to make the kinds of mistakes where, people start ranting and raving and making web pages about it.
Posting there. I saw actually a TikTok post the other day, where somebody was talking about how a writer had gotten worse and like had broken all the magic in their world and stuff. And it made me think of this because we had already planned on recording this and, doing it. And I was like, wow. And this person, no lie, went off for hours about this entire thing. And I was like, whoa. And that's not the kind of feedback you want, because somebody doesn't have to like your book. It's very different if your book is just not somebody's jam. But when a book has technical issues and throws the reader out of the book because of a technical issue, that's a problem, because it's very hard to recover being tagged as a bad writer, right? It's great. You don't like the story, it's fine. You don't have to like every story. You're going to get bad reviews. Take that in. Not everybody is going to be your fan, but if their review is they did it this way and this way in this chapter, and then this way differently in this chapter, and then this way differently, that's a problem, right? And you can change mechanics. It's totally fine to change the mechanic, but you have to write in why that mechanic is suddenly changed and how it applies now.
The awakening of the one, right? I mean, to go back to Buffy, they completely changed at the end how the Slayer magic worked, but that was the point. It was the goal, like to make everybody a Slayer. I'm so old right now because I love my Buffy.
You are? Well, they're bringing Buffy back, which we all love. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach that,
Yeah. There's so much. Cell phones solve like 98% of the problems on Buffy. But anyway.
No, I say that all the time. I'm like, Buffy would not have existed if we had these. Like most of it was going to look for somebody.
Mm-hmm. Every time they're like, I haven't heard from, Willow. I wonder if she's been kidnapped. But they changed the world mechanic. As long as you justify, even if you do, very popular in a lot of like romantasy is what I read primarily. And you have the character, the main, female lead, and, she starts off ordinary and she discovers her background and, okay, now you have magic like everybody else. Okay, let's level you up to there. And then, no, your magic is different. You can do this other thing. Okay, that's fine. She's magical. And then by the, book 3, she's a god or whatever. But that makes sense because you've built it into the character. It's when out of nowhere with no explanation, she's just suddenly, flinging fireballs when before she was struggling to float a foot off the ground. So those kinds of things are mechanic issues that you really want to work on.
Okay. So as we wrap up this, what writers should know, what is your overall arching advice? One is everybody should know that we have general world building guides. Links are in the show notes, but you are working on fantasy specific too for those authors that write that. But the general world building guide will help for those authors that have just a little tinkle of magical paranormalness in their books, right?
Yeah, there's a mechanics section that deals with physics and how physics works in your world. But then if in the fantasy specific one, there's going to be an entire section about how your magic system works. And it'll be organized, if you've seen the world building guide, it goes from general to specific. So that will be a good way for you to write down once and for all the rules that you can then just go quickly reference when you're writing, the next volume of the story. So keeping track is very important.
It is, because I, like you, up until you created this wonderful guide, would be like, I need to re-listen to the audiobooks of all of my books, which, by the way, takes several days to do that, sometimes weeks. And then I'm like, what am I writing again? Rah. So authors, whether it's you getting a world building guide or creating a Pinterest board or a sheet or something, track how the differences in your reality mechanics work from a paranormal magical standpoint, so your readers don't get thrown out of the story. So, Jam, thank you again for your amazing book, Lifesaver for Many. So, authors out there or creatives, this is what writers should know. You can listen to us, not listen to us. We have a little bit of advice from literally doing thousands of books, so we've seen what works and what doesn't, but find what works best for you. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and we'd love to hear from you. And otherwise, we hope you keep on writing, because writing is hard. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Drinking with Authors. Join us next time for another fun